Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. When I began this show, the entire point was to not only give each of you an unadulterated look into the world of psychedelic medicines, but was also to articulate and show how these experiences have allowed those that are connected with these medicines to transform their life. And as such, this episode is near and dear to my heart. On this week's episode, I dive back in with a returning guest, one of my dearest friends in the world, and a woman who has personally helped me so much in not only creating awareness around my own patterns and programs, just as psychedelic medicines have done for me, but also has allowed me to understand what to do to take action on what my soul is yearning for. This is a raw and unfiltered look into some of my own challenges and how I am currently moving through them, as our guest brings me through a live channeling session. And as such, sit back, put your curiosity caps on, and enjoy the ride, as I welcome the one and only Mary Buckingham back onto the show. Mary, I am so excited to have you back on the show. It's been too long. I think we did that last episode back in, what was it, March of last year, I think.
Oh, yeah, because we did the phone one before. Okay, yeah, that's right. A year ago.
Yeah, I know. Almost a year ago. I'm like, that's crazy. Time flies when you're having fun. Well, I'm so excited to have you back on. And, because you're a returning guest, I'd love if you could just update us, right, on what's been going on in your world. Again, like you guys know, I just said in the intro, if you guys haven't listened to Mary's first episode, I think you've been on maybe twice before to this podcast.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's been twice. So definitely go check out those past ones. And today what we're going to be getting into, just to tee everyone up, is, we're going to be diving into like what an actual, session with Mary looks like. Because for a lot of you guys, right, when you hear about like, psychic senses or getting in touch with intuition or these kind of things, if you're like me, sometimes you can be like, well, wait, what does that actually look like, right? What does it look like when someone is able to access these realms in an appointment, right? Like, what are the questions they may ask you? What are the ideas that might come out of someone like me who's getting the reading done and things like that? So before we dive into all that, though, I'd love if you give us an update on just what's been going on in your world. The state of the world right now is pretty wild. What you're seeing, things like that.
Oh my gosh, so good to be back. Yeah, so a couple updates. We were kind of just chatting right before this about how, so I do readings full time, and I have 4 of the clairs that I work with simultaneously. So the clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairsentience, and why am I blanking?
Clairaudience. Yeah, clairaudience, yeah. Right? Yeah. Yep. All the clairs get me confused every time.
Yeah. And so those kind of all come in at once and convey a message. And so when somebody comes in, I basically look at their eyes between 7 and 13 seconds, which is really all it takes. And then for the most part, my eyes are closed the whole time. And it seems like for sure this year of 2024, the light quota is increasing from our sun, and there's increased solar mass ejection activity, which means that there's sort of like a plasmic pressure pushing into our earth plane. And when I say plasmic pressure, it's like consciousness is sort of like a plasmic substance. If you want to, if in our human minds, we need to understand it in a way that we can touch it. And so what I've been like kind of tuning into is that, as we all know, the macro is a reflection of the micro. And so there's definitely sort of like a micro inflammation, which means like internally and individually, this heightened light quota coming in is pushing into people's consciousness, which is putting, it's like pressurizing, which is requiring that the things that are sort of like at the very, very bottom of the deep ocean that are not really being looked at or worked through are being kind of forced to the surface. And then when we take that and look at the macro, there's a lot of activity going on globally, politically, and, so many things beyond just those two topics. And there's a lot of like inflammation. And so particularly too, a lot of people are holding their energy like between their heart chakra and their throat chakra, because also collectively there's like a stuck throat chakra, like on the whole, because we're in this interim period of like things bubbling to the surface and being in the perfect kickoff position to like be expressed, be said. However, because of the heavy conditioning, whether it's, religious, environmental, familial, ancestral, there's like this clamping that takes place physically in the esophageal region of people's bodies, because it's the physical matter of our body, which is light condensed to matter, is responding to a tension energetically that's basically like choking people. Choking people off, which they wouldn't know that necessarily on a subtle level, but it's like the level of people that are dealing with thyroid conditions, Hashimoto's, Graves' disease, all of the autoimmune that's showing up is part of that inflammation that's going on the physical level. And then the other thing too that's sort of happening is it seems like there's a lot of animals crossing over, and there's a lot of animals that are very communicative, and especially the ancestors. And I don't go out and try to communicate with them. If they show up for a session, they show up, and the message is conveyed to the person who's sitting in front of me, whatever they're trying to communicate. And oftentimes another thing that's occurring in readings that I don't know if we've talked about this yet. I don't know if this was going on a year ago. I can barely remember, like a week ago.
I know. A week seems like a year at this point.
Yeah. There's like the concepts of epigenetics and our epigenome, and how, we have certain genetic expressions that can be either negatively expressed or positively expressed. And we're under so much stress individually and collectively that it's obviously so important to ground our nervous systems. But one of the things that's been interesting as well is that when people have been coming in, it's really hard to articulate in words. And we'll get into that later, but like, you can see of beings like leaning in DNA towards the father side versus the mother side. So someone can be more expressed in their maternal DNA expression, like by 70, they're like 70% mom and 30% dad. And like, what's very interesting about that is the ancestors are the ones that seem to be speaking to that more DNA imprinting stuff. Like, so they'll pull or provide, insight into the person's maybe like the cirrhosis of the liver, or like they've got recurring UTIs because of a kidney thing, because of something that got imprinted like 100 years ago. So those are the things that have been I don't refer to it as anything other than just like the quantum library. And each person walks in and they're kind of like they're their own zip file. And the purpose of the sessions are for their ascension, their purification. I think mostly like clarity, because there is the essence and importance of us to tap into our highest awareness, and therefore like a universal awareness, which then gets into like the 12 chakra system, which we have our 7 chakras, but then there's 12, and then there's also a 22 chakra system. But with readings, like, and this is something I actually learned after a few years that was actually occurring in the readings, is that, if you can think about each chakra as like a different folder of information within that quantum zip file of the individual carrying specific expression of consciousness, realizing itself. And each folder has really different and specific information, but the soul star and like the galactic. So there's like the 8th, ninth, and 10th chakras. So usually in a reading, if I do open my eyes, I don't go into their eyes. I'll go into like the 8th, ninth, 10th chakra and get into a state of like deep concentration and focus to basically hear with the inner ear, feel with the true felt sense, know with the higher mind, and hear with the inner ear.
Mm.
And in order to do those things, you have to get into like a really deep concentrated state.
Mm.
So I'm going to ping pong that back to you because
No, this is amazing. This is so dope. And I have a question, right? Like, so you were talking about all these different mechanisms, right? All these different facets, if you will, that can lead to, let's say, distortions, right? In someone's experience of themselves, life, God, whatever you want to call that distortion, right? So we have these distortions. And like you were saying, they can come through many different ways, right? They can come through physical illnesses. They can come through emotions. They can come through within that spectrum, like ancestral or familial or all these different things, right? One of the things that happened to me recently that was really cool was I met a woman named Kathleen who's going to be on the podcast soon, and she's an Akashic record reader. And I met her through a woman named Amy Belair, who's another Akashic record reader. I think she has a whole course out there. She's amazing, super fun. I went on their podcast, and I talked with Kathleen, and she was like, "Hey, I'd love to give you a reading." And I was like, "This is awesome, sweet." And so I had this pesky issue with headaches, right at the right base of my skull. Like, there would be no tightness there. But all of a sudden, like, originally it was every day for like a year and a half. And then after that, they subsided a little bit, but I would still get like one a month that was just like dull and annoying. And it was really just an aggravation, right? Like that was the feeling I felt every time was I was very short fused when I would have them. And they were kind of just like, they felt like a distraction of sorts, right? And so I was mentioning this to her and she's like, well, let's see what's in there. So she tunes in and she goes, hey, you have an energetic implant, right? And so I was like, oh, interesting. So she removed it. And when she removed that, I didn't feel anything like right off the bat. But I will tell you, since then, that was like 2.5 months ago, I haven't had one headache. And so it's been really wild. And I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that or like what that might have been. I've asked her and gotten some explanations, which was awesome. But I'm always curious to hear from you specifically, like what that could be, or if you've experienced things like that before. So I'd love to ask you what your experience is with things like that.
Yeah. So just as I kind of drop in and look into it myself, let's see. So that's near the part of the brain where we tune into basically like our proprioception. So like our sense of being like in the ether, in the space.
Yeah.
We're kind of here and then there's some stuff out here. And so when it's anything's like going on in the right brain, it's like that's kind of our spiritual brain, our creative brain. One thing that I can say with people call it implants, it could also be called maybe conditions or programs, like, and how we label things is for sure important as we speak it out. But basically, like, there's different ways that programs can exist within somebody, and they can be planted through a seed or an implant. And so the implant is like basically the genesis of something that becomes an overlay. Let's see if I can describe this how I'm seeing it visually. So basically, like with projection overlays, you may have had something, come into your environment or someone influence you in a certain way energetically on a subconscious subtle level, that then what happens is it sort of, and it happens subtly too, because it's a seed that then slowly begins to sprout. And what it can cause is like an overactivity in a certain part of the brain that then can headaches, pressure, because there was like an over processing that was happening that was related to, let's see, like almost like taking advantage of your spiritual energetic higher center, which is like in your brain. Then as a result, it can project outward and create an overlay on your reality, which is then what probably the bounce back was, like the agitation, the irritation, which it probably felt like it was like a ricochet between you and the process and then what was coming out, because it was just back quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to clearing, like the power of visualization, I'd be curious to hear like what her process is with clearing. Like if she was like using words or if she was visualizing. But I do know that the power of visualizing certain color rays. So, and as people either know or don't know, each of our energy centers correlates with certain colors. And we often think of like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, but there's like a color spectrum. And I mean, people on here, I'm sure have done psychedelics, obviously. So like we know that in certain aspects of journeying that you can see colors that you didn't even know were colors. So that's kind of leads to the next point, where if you get into a deeply concentrated state where you can shift your brainwave state to a certain frequency hertz, you can basically start to almost like open up the mind and relax the body and the mind together to then start to experience and visualize certain colors that you can ask spirit, like, okay, what color do I need to like flood this energy center with in order to move and clear this energy? And that would be like, either you can do that with yourself, or like the person who's conducting the reading does that internally and then sends those colors through a wave to that blocked energy that's usually just like sitting in the body.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, because, when I think about it, I know that things like that don't have to be caused by something that had just happened, but I think about well, what had just happened around that time? Because it was August of 2017 when it happened. It was a week before I went to the Eclipse Festival. And so I remember I woke up one day and I had this maybe 5 out of 10 annoying headache. It wasn't a migraine, but it was annoying. And I remember I was like, oh, this is annoying. It'll go away tomorrow. And then it didn't go away the next day and didn't go away the next day. And a week later, I'm going to Oregon and it's still there. And I'm like, what the hell is happening? And I also missed my flight to Oregon and my flight back, which did not help. And so there's just a lot of things happening around that time. But it was about 3 weeks before I got the headache that many people that have heard this podcast have heard the story before, where I accidentally puddled myself with 50 hits of LSD. So when you think about that kind of experience, which, again, for anyone listening, I am not recommending this. I would have never done that in my right mind. I did it by accident, but sometimes things happen, right? And that experience really was a complete control delete on a lot of things. Within that, I imagine I stirred up quite a bit of stuff, and I remember that it was an overall very positive experience, very challenging in the beginning because I didn't really know what had gone wrong. All I knew was that the amount that I had thought I had taken and the experience that I thought I would have, relevant, every experience is different, but I had taken let's say 2 or 3 hits of acid before. So I knew okay, generally it's going to be within that realm. And then when I started getting synesthesia, 30 minutes into the experience, where all of a sudden I was tasting colors and hearing, smells and just weird things. I was some of my last conscious thoughts were well, something got fucked up, and I had no idea what, but I knew I didn't have the brain abilities at that point to really think into it. So I was the only option I have to do is surrender. So overall it was a very positive experience, but I always think about that because, how Kathleen had described it, which is very similar to what you described, is it was really just an implant there to distract me away from my growth, right? Distract me away from being spiritual, distract me away from owning my triggers, distract me away from just my development as a human being. And so like, that's exactly what it did. It made me super edgy, made me super irritated. And like, I was more likely to like, react. I was more likely to like act out of alignment, things like that, because I was just like dealing with this thing, like headaches, for anyone who's dealt with them, like, like you can't escape them. It's not like a stomach ache that's like down there. It's not like you like hurt your foot. Like it's like in your head, and so like, it can be hard to get out of it. It can be hard to sleep, it can be hard to like do anything. So yeah, I wanted to ask about that because, I think many people deal with these stubborn chronic issues that the modern medical system has no explanation for. And I think like for me, that's why I love this realm because, I think that for me, I've had more success in my own journey in seeing like, plant teachers and then also like psychics like yourself, right? Like people that can go into the causal realm and figure out what the cause is. So instead of looking into the realm of effect, we're like, okay, I have a headache, but why? Well, the realm of effect, right? Like our individual reality that we live in is not going to be the area you're going to find the cause. That's going to be in the causal realm, right? And so like being able to have people like yourself in my life, and I'm so grateful to have that can tap into that realm at like just alarming rates, right? Like I can get there if I spend a lot of time and effort there. I can have ideas pop through, but you have a clear channel to that realm. I mean, to me, it's invaluable. Like I would not be where I am today if I didn't have friends like you that were able to really like allow me to remember who and what I truly am, right? Like that last session we had back in March when we did it in person, there were so many fascinating things that came out of that have really ruminated around my consciousness ever since and really led to some amazing things. So it's just super cool.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I actually thought about that after that session, if there was anything that kind of like got like what occurred after that maybe had an effect of maybe a light bulb going off or like a subtle shift. I'm curious.
Yeah, the main thing was around my father and what you had spoken about with my dad. And there was specifically something, I don't know if it was the same sentence or like the same area of the podcast. We had talked about this, but there was like something to do with me being a warrior in the Roman times. Like it was like a Roman warrior type thing. And I remember that when you mentioned that during that appointment, there was like an image that flashed into my mind of like, it felt like Assassin's Creed, like it felt like, cause that's in the Roman era. I felt that. And it's funny because after that, I kind of released it because I was like, okay, I now know like something definitely happened. I mean, it was a full on psychedelic experience. Like we're sitting there, you're talking, you mentioned that. I have this crazy image pop in of like an individual with a shield, a sword, and chainmail armor on. And then it kind of just poofed away. And, I've always known that I've been drawn to like, medieval times, Viking stuff. We've talked about that as well. I don't really know what it means overall, but I know it meant something deep to me. What I can notice after that is that it was after that appointment that I really started diving even a level deeper into my masculine and really like, continuing to like build the business and, be responsible and like, create even deeper discipline, right? Because like, there are many patterns I've had for a long time, like, when I grew up, I was a avid video game player. And so like, staying up late is a very easy button for me to hit. But like, it was after that appointment where another level of discipline hit me where it was like, sure, I could go to bed at midnight and I could pull it off and I could do these things. But do I really feel at my best when I'm doing that? And so it was a lot of like these like radically honest moments after that. And in terms of like that image, like that person that I saw with the chainmail and the sword and the shield, that person was a very on point person. Like they knew exactly like the feeling I felt when I tuned into them was that they knew why they were alive. They knew where they were going and they were okay with whatever happened. They were surrendered to the process. And that's really what I feel like has transpired in my life over the last 10 months since we had that appointment is like, just like, again, it didn't all happen overnight, but like when I really look back at the last 10 months, I'm like, wow, that's been a big journey of like saying no more, sticking to more boundaries, because again, I also grew up being a people pleaser. So like learning to say no was something that was really challenging. And especially when you get into business, right? Like, there's like this hustle culture of like, say yes to everything, grind, right? And so I had kind of fallen into that a little bit, again, creating space as well to actually think into like, what do I want my life to look like? What do I actually want to wake up and do every day? And if I don't like what I'm doing, well, that's a me thing, right? I must figure out either course correct, or if the things keep happening, like maybe I'm trying to course correct, and this has actually happened before, I'm trying to course correct, but I keep noticing that my calendar still keeps getting overbooked and things like that. And then I realized like, who's this person to blame? And it's like, well, dude, you make your calendar, bro. Like, why are you saying yes to so many things? Where's that coming from? And so like all of this like self-inquisition came as a result of like, it happened right after that. Like that event was the trigger. I like felt something shift within me. I couldn't put a finger on it. And I still can't like literally say it was this specific thing. But what I noticed after that is all the stuff I mentioned. So it was really powerful.
I actually really love that you just shared your experience of basically, so I'll jump to the fact that we are multidimensional. And this word is, been thrown around in this, community that we're in or whatever you want to call it. And what that means as I experience it energetically is there are multiple layers of our beingness that exists on the energetic level. And what that also means even further is that those different layers hold a different level of consciousness. And your third eye was able to hear, well, your inner ear heard what was being said when I was channeling, because when I'm channeling or when I'm in a session, it's like being said with a different frequency that can only hit and land in your auditory faculty if it's at a certain frequency. So it's like, it's not up to me to like make it land a certain way. It either does or it doesn't. And so it hits your auditory, your clairaudient center, which then boom, sparked your third eye, giving you a visual. So then it's literally when you were describing it, I just was seeing visually how it went in the auditory faculty. And then you want to imagine your third eye is like the projector, and it spoke to that throughout the image. And then you were able to like basically see with your inner eye a different level of your own consciousness to experience a part of self that existed at a certain time. And when we kind of go further, like time, the space-time continuum is so fascinating, which is why like when we go into these multidimensional territories, if we are in an intentional, heart opened, safe, contained space, we can go into these deeper levels of consciousness to experience and or embody a lesson. So like you were able to see an aspect of yourself that's already existed. And maybe now in this third dimensional dense reality, there's a lot of, everyone talks about the amnesia we get when we come here and we reincarnate, and it's all about the remembering and maybe retrieving intelligence from the past or the future timelines. And it's like you can get all the readings and have all the sessions that you want, but it's like it's not until the individual has the internal deep experience of like recollecting that then on a cellular level, like literally shifts everything, which is like the shift everything, not in this like drastic extreme way, but it's kind of like those small breadcrumbs or those little moments where there's like a flash of a recollection or a memory, and your body experiences it, which then creates like a shift or an evolution. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful, and I love when you explain these things because my intuition just says yes, yes, and yes all over. And there's been like so many things. Like I feel like if this last year was one thing for me, it was the year of awareness, like many awareness that is gained, right? Like much awareness that is gained. Not all of it is easy, right? Like this has been a year of seeing myself in certain ways, like seeing my patterns, like seeing my programs, seeing like, oh, I'm still running patterns from my parents and how they approached like working and business, which was like, do whatever you can, like burn the candle at every end you need to burn it at to be quote unquote successful. But in reality, I know intellectually that's not success. Like burning yourself out at the price of your business or whatever is not like the right way to do it. At least for me, it's not what's in alignment. And so it was a big year of like just recognizing like, yeah, like these are areas where I'm still not fully in alignment that I now get to bring back into alignment. And it was funny because last year I told myself the whole year it was the year of efficiency. But really what it was the year of awareness. This is the year of efficiency. Like I can feel it like right on January 1st. And I know that the Gregorian calendar is not really accurate, but you know, for whatever reason, right on January 1st, I felt this big shift where I had a beautiful New Year's down in Virginia. We connected with some MDMA, and I really just had like this heart open moment of just like looking around at, you know, the people that were there and the things we were doing. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, I want more time to do things like this. I don't always want to feel like every day I'm working for like 14 hours a day. I'm grateful that I love what I do. But like I was mentioning to you before with Breathe with Cannabis, right? Like that's a perfect example of like something that was just smooth sailing, right? Like a couple hours a month, you know, as a projector in human design, it works really well for me. You know, podcasting, coaching, the other things, they work amazing for me. But it's like my own tendency to try to do more and more and more of them as kind of like this weird competition with myself that like no one knows it's happening. Like no one's daring me to do these things. No one's doing it. And that's why it's really funny looking into these because again, the fingers all point back to me. I'm the only one doing this, you know, and that's why it becomes like a cosmic giggle because it's hard to see these things in the moment. But when you look back in hindsight, you can be like, why am I continuing to do these things? Right? Like what's under the hood there that's driving these things? And so that experience was a big part of me, like actually like, okay, like I'm actually going to look at the metaphorically unclean closet for the first time and really accept how messy it's gotten so that the next year I can really start working to actually clean that metaphorical closet and organize it in a way that's going to lead me to more joy, you know, more ability to do the other things I live in life, right? Like be able to get back into music, be able to do all the things I want to do, travel, you know, start new projects, these kind of things, right? And so it's really powerful stuff, you know, and one I would say challenge that I have been moving through that I would love if you have any insight on is this idea, right? Like this exact one of just like this go, go, go mentality. And one of the things I figured out about myself through my buddy Jason Ganzuk, we're doing a hair tissue mineral analysis protocol, is that I'm what's called
to stop you before you, because I was just tuning into what you're just going to say.
Please tell me.
Around your adrenals. Okay, keep going.
It is related to adrenals. And basically like what he told me or like what came out in this HTMA test is that I'm what's called a fast oxidizer. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just certain people are slow, certain people are fast. It doesn't mean like your metabolism is fast or slow or whatever. But basically what it means, and it took a second for this to really hit into me, what it means is that when my body goes through stress, my natural response is to speed up and go faster. And so like when I really sat into that, like I remember I was doing a deep meditation with cannabis where like I had heard that and intellectually understood like, oh yeah, I speed up when I get stressed out. Cool. But I hadn't really linked it to like emotion and my mental processes. Like I had thought about it maybe just like in my nervous system, which again, of course, is related to everything in the body, but I just hadn't made the connection. It was very left brain of how I was viewing it before that. But when it really sat into me, I was like, yo, that's what I'm going through, right? Like when there's a challenge that comes up in business, what do? My first response is I must have to do more. So then I stack my calendar. Then I get stressed because my calendar is overwhelmed. When I get stressed, what happens? I got to put more stuff on the calendar. And so this has like been a cyclical loop my entire life. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like it's helped me a lot in like, you know, learning guitar very quickly, getting into podcasting, starting a business very quickly. So it's not a bad thing, but it's almost like an untamed horse that, you know, needs some breaking in.
Said that. Oh my gosh. I have to just tell you what's been, okay. I've been seeing this racehorse, like, which is you, galloping at like the horses you see at the tracks that people bet on. There's an embodiment of like that energy of, because horses are very, you know, they're vital, they're strong, they're also loyal, they're heart-centered animals. So it's not for lack of that, because there's also different fast paces that people can move at that are not based in the heart, that are based in, you know, a totally different energy. So this is really specific. And then also your throat chakra, like in the back, I guess I'll just go into this, but like,
please.
Yeah. So basically like let me see here, because I'm also seeing this image of behind you, and I almost am getting deja vu as if maybe this has already come through for you before, which I don't remember what comes through in sessions always. I'll remember maybe blips, but and sometimes they can be repetitive because a lot of these things can get so deeply sort of like embedded in us that it takes a while to kind of slough off and kind of like ascend out of it. There's like two Ryans. There's the Ryan that is super high functioning, fast paced, like this racehorse. I literally, there's been like four things that you've said that were like, right. I was hearing it before you said it. That Ryan is like running the business, highly functioning, probably like, it's like driving yourself up a hill faster than anybody else is getting. And then you get up the hill and you look back and it's like, come on guys, like hurry up. Let's catch up.
Yeah.
I don't have time.
Story of my life.
So I got to keep going. And so there might be times where you're working with people business wise or in a team where they feel like you're maybe, it might even in fact trigger their abandonment stuff because they're like, are you leaving me? Like, am I not enough? Or am I not working fast? Are you going to outpace me? Are you going to outgrow me? Because you're also someone that like attracts a lot of people. So you'll run up the hill, you'll get to the top, and then there's a whole new crowd of people, and then you'll start engaging with all of them, and then it starts a whole new thing, and then the pack of people that you run with are like, wait for us, don't forget us. And then what happens is it's an interesting thing around your throat energy center, because I'm going to try to see if I can describe this and articulate it correctly. So basically the over like running it happens in the front, but not with boundaries, more so with like give all of my expressive connecting energy to connect with people. And that comes with like someone who's naturally extroverted. So that makes sense. And on the other side, there's like, and so this is where there's like two Ryans, and it's like, I guess you could say, I'm not really seeing that it's like a higher self and a shadow. I'm just seeing two versions of self that you are literally running, which can also contribute to a sense of fatigue and possibly what I'm seeing in your adrenals, which I'll get to in a second. It's all going to connect, but basically there's like another aspect of the throat that is being like, let's say, over exercised, because there's another aspect of it that needs to be opened, like a gate needs to be opened, that you kind of open it a little bit like you're a kid peeking in the door, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to close it. And then you open it a little bit and you're going to close it. And that is more related to boundaries, where it's like, because when you're someone who's heart-centered, likable, you're connected with a lot of people, there's a magnetic energy. There's a lot of people that want something from you, especially when you exude an energy of caretaking. I got it. Like, I've got you. Like, that's where I'm also, again, seeing that part of you that has the javelin or in the chainmail or whatever. You're on that horse and you're going. And I think, being a leader with great power requires great responsibility. Like, so even deeper with that, I think the responsibility with a lot of leaders is like being able to know when the self needs to say, not today. And it's not that I'm seeing that you can't say that. It's that there's almost like a part of you that's like, I'm going to just table that for later, like compartmentalize, because you're working, you have a goal in mind, and your trajectory on a personal and a business and a financial level, actually all of those together, let's just use the word sovereign level. You kind of know, you've seen the bird's eye view of what needs to be done to get there. What that means is that there's certain personal sacrifices you're making, which I actually think is related to this life that we've talked about, where, again, as a leader, where you're sort of like guiding a lot of people, there can be this sense of, I'm going to have to just say yes for now, and just table the no, because I've got this goal in mind. And so what I'm seeing is that then in the back of the throat chakra, it's pointing to that area. And it's showing me like a platinum, white and blue sphere. It's basically saying like, if he can allow himself to take that book off the shelf, AKA the thing where you say you're going to just table that for now because you have too many other things that are more important, it kind of goes into that deeper program of like, this thing that's greater than me is more important than me, which actually isn't negative. So this is what's interesting. And I think this is where, when you're at a level of like operating as you are, because I'm also seeing this image of you with like 1,000 arms behind you, of your own arms, like
Yeah.
they're always kind of like like operating at all times. And so now it's almost like you're, instead of being like, you have to change, this is like sense of urgency, it's more of like a choice point where it's like, here are some options. You can make some adjustments to allow your own personal self to have some more space, which I think when we were connecting before, there's already some things that you've been brainstorming around the business, around what makes sense, that will allow you personally to have more space, because you almost have like catapulted yourself into this territory of like exposure and a lot of people that you're helping, that not has forced you, but put you in a position where it's like, I'm going to keep going, 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 because I don't really have the bandwidth necessarily to personally say no to this, this, and this. But then let's go back to like hustle culture and that whole thing, where your sense of personal self and happiness and balance can kind of like go by the wayside. But again, you have a choice to know like, okay, I'm aware of what's happening over here. And I'm aware that there's also a new sort of like timeline I can embark on or enter into that will allow a different part of me to come forward. And that's the part that I'm seeing in the back of the throat, which is related to your clairaudience. So going into a choice that you have is that if you open that other door in the throat, which is going to force Ryan to be in maybe a couple situations or have a couple conversations that will be you handing back some energy that you've been carrying, it will actually free up the space in the back for you to hear more of like what you're supposed to hear in your inner ear from God, from universe, whatever you want to call it, which interestingly enough will allow your ego, which operates on a like a very intellectual, like logical, structured way. It's not destructive. It's not about like a sense of self that needs to be this, this, or this. It's not about that. It's more about like it, you channel it into your business, freeing up some of that space, and then we'll open up the back of it and you'll be able to hear at one point, you'll kind of have that moment of like, oh, if I do slow down a little bit, or if I do kind of like give myself a little bit of space with that opportunity or that situation, whatever, you'll hear that higher mind speak to you in a way that will allow basically like a wave of peace, of serenity, like you already said you already had at one point in Virginia, where it's like, this is what's important to you. And then it will tame the horse that's kind of in a race right now. Like it's in the season of the race, you know, and it's almost like probably another part of you, another aspect of yourself is excited about that. It's like, let's see what this, and this can do, how fast I can run it, what that way of running the business would do and what it would create, because it's like a masterminding of your own life, which is like, we all have that opportunity to experience and create what we want. So does that all make sense?
Oh my God, Mary, you just read me like a fucking book. Hashtag wrecked, but it's like, it's so true. Like, I mean, this is literally me, like 100%, like everything you said was spot on. And I'll draw attention to the things that really like perked me up. This is literally what's happening. It's two selves within me. One is just full berserker level, right? Wants to be on 24/7, loves stimulation, right? That's where I've had to be very careful with caffeine, kratom, nicotine, things like that. It's taken a long time to balance those things in my life in a healthy way. Luckily, I've been able to do it now. Like that was one of the big shifts that happened last year, was looking at the inputs that I put into my body and realizing like, okay, you have one coffee a day. It's not the end of the world, right? You might have one kratom throughout the day, et cetera. It's not like you're going crazy, but at the same time, you are leveraging energy that is not natural, and you are building a life, like a business lifestyle around that, which is not really feasible when you're not on those things. Like you can't not have your coffee one day. And that's not the definition of empowerment. That's disempowerment, right? Like now I'm a slave to, oh my goodness, I need this external thing to move through my day. And like, like I do all the things. Like I go to bed on time. I get 8 hours every night. I move my body every day. I eat the highest quality food. I have quiet time, like, not enough, but I do have some quiet time. I do the red light. I do a sauna. I do methylene blue. I do Shilajit. I do the HTMA with Jason. I do psychedelics. I do massage. I do chiro. I do acupuncture. And so these are the things I'm doing every day, not necessarily for like the modalities like chiro and acupuncture, but there was a while where I was getting acupuncture twice a week for a year. And like, it was because like my nervous system was getting so like, just like jazzed up. And it was because like, I'm constantly in this like, this mode of like more. Like I just want to build so fast. And that's like you said, it's not inherently bad, but it's out of balance with the other self that like wants some time to like take a book and read it and not have a set amount of time. Like, okay, I can read for an hour and then I got to go to this thing. Like, like that's really what my life has become. And there was a time where it was completely the opposite. And this is how the law of polarity works, right? Like when I was in my early 20s, I didn't have a job. I taught guitar lessons, right? So I would work for like a couple hours a week. I was living with my parents, right? So I had no overhead. And I would just take psychedelics and really just like be in that mode and have a lot of space. I would work out for like 4 hours a day. I would just do whatever I wanted. I'd wash my car like 3 times a day. I just had ultimate freedom. And then that got old, right? Because I was like, hey, I'm not really working towards anything. So then I got the job at the dispensary. And that was like kind of like the first little kick. But then when I started the business, then it became a real big kick. And at first, I didn't know what I was doing in business. So what happened first? It was I got to travel all the time. So I was traveling and meeting all these amazing people and making all these incredible connections, Paul, Aubrey, all these things. But at the same time, like it was that like feeling of like more. And it did work. Like it definitely worked. That's great to do for a season. But I've been realizing that this is becoming my typical waking state of reality. And so like, that's what I meant on like January 1st. It was like that first time where I had really like, I've had so many awareness points of this, but it was the time where it just became embodied. It was like, okay, now is the time. Like now is really the time to really ask yourself, like, not what do you think it takes to be successful, but what do you want your life to look like? Period. And build your business around that. And whatever success you get is perfect for you because that's what you want your life to look like. And that's what really matters to you. And so obviously over the past, 21 days or 24 days or whatever since then, it's been a lot of hard truths, right? Of having to start to actually vocalize like, hey, I'm not okay with that, and that's been something that's been really hard for me throughout my life because one thing that Rachel and I dove into recently was the fact that because of my upbringing, my parents are amazing. Like literally gave me the perfect childhood I could ever imagine. And they're human beings, right? So like all of us, we have flaws, right? That's why we're here. And so one of my mom's flaws specifically was that she went through her life, and my dad did too, actually, in a big amount of way, now that I think about it, believing that like, and they didn't consciously ever say this, but like when you look at their actions and you look at what I'm doing, it's very similar. They would go around thinking that other people's emotions are their responsibility. So like, let's say, for instance, that my mom had a discrepancy with someone, right? Well, she would just go, you know what? Like, I know this person's going to freak out if I say anything. I can handle it. I'll just table it. I'll just eat it, right? Like, because I just don't want to have to like have the conversation and potentially have someone get upset with me and things like that, because that's going to be more. And I'm already maxed out, And so it's almost like this defense mechanism is to keep yourself going so fast that you have a really valid, logical excuse to get out of having some of these hard conversations. It's like, dude, I'm literally maxed. I don't have the time. I don't have the bandwidth. So as long as this isn't like someone trying to put a stake into my heart, I'm going to be okay just saying like, hey, whatever, it's just little things, just water under the bridge. But what that does overall is that little boy inside of me, it doesn't make him trust me too much, right? Because like, he's like, well, so you're willing to put yourself through discomfort to save other people from it? Like, that seems kind of backwards. And so that was a big aspect of it too. And then what you were talking about with regards to the climbing the mountain, and then the tribe from before being like, hey, wait for me. Like, this is something that Rachel and I have gone through. When Rachel and I first got together, for anyone who knows me in person, you'll laugh at this. And for anyone who doesn't know me in person, if you meet me, you'll see this right away. But I'm an extrovert, right? Like when I get into a party atmosphere, right? Like say there's like a get together, like in Virginia, right? The second I walk in that door, I go into full presence and I just start going where the conversations lead me. And there's no awareness of like, oh, like this person, you know, like Rachel, I came here with, she might not know anyone. So like, I got to like bring her in. Like sometimes I just go crazy. Mm-hmm. And so there were times at parties where Rachel would be like, hey, like, you know, like, why are you ignoring me? And I'm like, huh? I'm not ignoring you. What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, well, like, you know, I came to a circle you were in and then you walked away, or like, you know, I was there for a little while. We talked. And then like you went to like with someone at the volcano station or whatever. And I'm like, listen, that is like where my inner child is fully expressed. Like, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm a kid in a candy store. Right. And so like that whole thing has been a really big healing point for both of us, because Rachel has a core wound of abandonment. Mm. I have a core wound of not being enough. Mm. So when you think about how these things pair up, the person who thinks they're not enough is always going to be trying to do more. And the person that's abandoned is going to want presence from the people around them. Mm-hmm. And so like literally when you put us together, it's like, oh, that makes perfect sense of why you attracted each other, because that's one of the main things you're going to heal in one another, or have the opportunity to heal. And I'm super fortunate that Rachel is super conscious and we're aware of these things and we talk about them often. But it is like a really big mind fuck, you know, to really go under the hood like this. And this is why I always speak to everyone on this show and everything about how it's important to have these dialogues with people in your life, whether it's a friend, family member, someone you hire, et cetera. Like, these are the things that we're here to actually understand. And like you were saying, like all of this is an amazing opportunity, because none of these aspects of me are bad, right? But at the same time, they do require me as the father figure of me coming in and having a little more balance to them. And that's really where, like, you know, in Paul Chek's 4-doctor system, more doctor quiet can come in handy. Like, I remember in 2020 when I had started the business, but like, you know, I didn't really know what I was doing yet. I had enough, you know, financial money saved or whatever that I didn't really have to worry about it for a little while. And I remember that like the whole world was shut down. There was nothing to really do. I would just go into the woods and mountain bike. I would hang out with a couple of friends. Like, it was like the only time in my life where there wasn't a bunch of stimulus happening all the time. You know, I had plenty of time to like watch movies or like read books or like, you know, stretch for 3 hours, you know, and just like really listen to podcasts and, you know, get into the woods. And, you know, no one was on the road. So it was super easy to get everywhere. You know, a lot of times I missed that time, to be honest. But, yeah, you know, it was that time period where like during that time, my psychic senses were through the roof. I remember I would try to go to bed and I would just be getting idea. And I have to keep getting up and writing them down. These days, I mean, I get ideas, don't get me wrong, but they don't have the space to come in as much anymore, you know, and that's what I'm feeling. And it's funny you mentioned the throat chakra, because in September, I went to a music festival, and that was a small little festival.
Pictures, that looked amazing.
Oh my goodness. It was so fun. You have to come and do it. It was called Garden Fest. Shout out to my buddy Nate who put it on. Permatours did the festival with him. So like every festival they do, they build something to do with permaculture, right? So they built this like cob oven. They're teaching all this stuff about permaculture. It's like 75, 80 people there tops, super intimate. It was interesting because my friend Brianna, shout out to her, she does aura readings. And so there was one day where it was like super hot. We were all like kind of like in the tent, just like hanging out. And I was getting ready to give a speech. And she was like, hey, do you want me to do a quick aura reading on you? I was like, sure, you know, fuck me up. Let's go. And so she ended up like doing this beautiful reading. And at the end, she draws, right? She does like drawings of it. And she was like, yeah, like everything's really, you know, going well on you and things, but you have this blue mass in the back of the right side of your throat that just like wants to be expressed. And I know, Mary, like I know my crux in this lifetime in terms of like how my wound plays out is the challenge of saying no. It's like my number one challenge in life is like being able to like, you know, because in the moment, right, like what happens is like, let's say someone comes to me and, you know, again, I've gotten much better at like, when I know something is like definitely not in alignment, I have no problem saying like, hey, I'm sorry, I just don't have the bandwidth right now.
Yeah.
But let's say something comes to me that like I am really excited about, but maybe I haven't done the due diligence to look into like if I have time for it. That immediate thing that happens is like that feeling that goes right through me, right? It's like this channel opens up and I start seeing all the possibilities. And in that moment, I have all the energy. Like, and I'm like, let's go fucking conquer the world yesterday. Like, let's do it now. And I think that's the Ariesness in me too. Like, I just love like going out, doing stuff. Like my favorite feeling, one of my favorite feelings, I've told Rachel this, is like when I look at a calendar day and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get all that done. And then all of a sudden it's nighttime and I can look back at like, oh my God, how did I do all that? Like there'll be days like I don't do this anymore because I can't. But when I was running the 2 podcasts, I would do 6 episodes in a day sometimes just to batch them out.
Oh my God.
And I remember talking to Nathan Riley about that. And this was back when, you know, I would enhance myself with Kratom every once in a while and whatnot. I was like, yeah, man, I've done like, 5 episodes today. You're my sixth. And he just looked at me and was like, dude, you got to reel that in, bro. And like at the time I knew he was right. I knew what he was getting at, but there was this feeling in me of like, haha, like, no, I can even do more. Right. And like, that's the voice that, again, like, there are times that really comes in handy. There are times in business, for anyone who runs one, you just got to thug it out. Like, it just is what it is. But when that becomes your default, that's when it becomes challenging. So it's really funny you mention all this.
Because as you were talking, I just was seeing a whole lot. So I'm going to try to track it. But basically, like, these two aspects, there's the hyper productive, and then there's this other aspect. And how I'm seeing him is very like wizardy, connected with the elementals, one with the forest, one with the particularly, let's see, the earth, water, but again with the forest, like pretty connected with all the elements. Merlin he is, I would say, like your higher mind aspect that ultimately is the aspect that is providing the information to me to speak to this other aspect of you that's functioning, and he's like chilling and watching and actually not ever seemingly in a rush to change you. He's the higher wise mind that is very connected to with like synchronicities and numbers, which I would be curious after your experience with that maybe as of late, because there's something with that, like there's something connecting with the sacred perfection of everything and how there is a time for things. And wizards and like the Merlin energy, it's like there's a understanding of time and how it works in different dimensions, and how in this dimension it's allowing you, a part of you, to almost like run itself into the ground, but like not in a negative way, but you do hit these points where you kind of come to a halting stop and you're like, whoa, I got here really fast. Kind of like what you said with like going through a day and you're like, how did I do that? And or you'll be standing at the top of a hill and there's all these people like like cheering, and you're just kind of like, whoa, I didn't even expect that, and like this is cool, great, but I got more to do, so I love you all, but I gotta go to the next
Yeah.
And so it's really like, again, going back to that multi-dimensional aspect, because I want to speak to this too. Like there's shadow and there's our light. And so we go into, you already mentioned it, the law of polarity, and how one isn't bad. They're equal and opposite. They're equal and opposite energies. And so, but where you are in this lifetime is the shadow isn't like you are somebody who wants the best for humanity and for growth, and like you function on the code of empathy. And so your shadow is more it's less about being, whether it's the shadow or not, but about competition, which can create, when it isn't managed, like a overexhaustion. And so the thing with this other aspect of self is that, again, like the more that you allow it to guide you, which it does already, like you do listen to it, but the more that you take its direction when it says you need to say no to that, you need to say yes to that, or whatever, because that energy that you feel where it opens and it creates this expansion is from that energy, which is an expansive energy. And when you continue to not like take orders, but listen to when like, okay, that door that I need to open in the throat to say to say no or to say yes, I'm going to like have that difficult conversation and just get it out. I'm not going to table it any longer, because what will happen is like Ryan will let things stay tabled for like 3 weeks or 6 months, and that turns into like an accumulation of energy. So then when you do like have the realization and like get it removed, you do have like this huge influx of what I'm seeing as light codes encoded or encrypted, however you want to put it, with numbers. And interestingly, when that comes in, it kind of like synchronizes on a frequency wavelength through your brain, creating more of like a balance. And then there's just a day where suddenly you wake up and you're like, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, that's just, it's done. Like, it's cleared. And that's that part of yourself, that higher self that you allowed in when you intuitively took its direction. So then as you continue to trust that aspect, it's going to continue to just basically flood you with a lot of information, particularly through the clairaudience, which it's all this energy in the throat. There's also the third eye ability that you'll have as well that's going to keep. So those two in particular, the more that this one opens, the back will open and this will continue to get stronger. The third eye. Yeah.
That makes so much sense, because it's everything I'm feeling like in this present moment, like throughout, like looking back at my life, et cetera. And, for me, I'm like, fuck yeah. Right. Because like, I know for me, like, and there's actually something else I want to draw attention to in a second about the Merlin / forest / like wizard vibe. So remind me if I forget about that. But like, this is literally everything. It's like literally every challenge in my life can be boiled down to this one challenge, which is like, are you choosing yourself? And if you are, right, like, are you choosing yourself really? Or are you actually just not? Once again, are you acting out of these programs and patterns that you were raised around, right? To just like hustle culture, just like anything for the mission, just go, 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 go. And, that's been something like we were talking about before, right? Like what I've noticed in business in terms of like overall, like, a lot of people have given me wisdom in terms of like, build it like this or do it like that. And I'm finally getting to a point where I'm like, this is what I want. And I'm building it around that. And that's just how I'm going to do it, and people like Aaron coming into my life and whatnot, Aaron Abke, for anyone on the show, showing me different ways in which I could be, especially he's a projector as well. Right. So like, him being like, dude, I don't know how you do what you do, man. I got like 4 good hours a day and that's it. Like that's like my time I can be on. And, anything from there, I can't. Now I do know that based on what Rachel's told me and also what Chris has told me from Gene Keys, that my Virgo-ness does give me more energy than a typical projector would have. Like I do have a little bit more energy, but I do know that like overall, like, yeah, like I've enjoyed my entire life pushing it. Like I've enjoyed pushing, like, what is my potential? What can I do? And so like my whole life, that's why I named my business Highly Optimized, right? It's like, I don't know why I'm obsessed with these things, right? Like I don't know why, but I am. And so like, I imagine for people out there, right? Like this is when I was starting the business. I'm like, I imagine there are other people out there like me that just want to full throttle it constantly. And if you're going to do that, there's certain things that you must have in your life, right? There's certain things you must do. But now hindsight's always 2020. I'm coming back in and saying, actually, even if you can do that, trust me, I've done it. It doesn't really lead to like excitement or happiness or peace more than anything. Like, again, it can be a season of your life, right? Like, say if you're just getting into business, yeah, you might want to thug it out for 3-6 months, maybe even a year, right? But like, have an exit plan. The same way as when you get into crypto, right? Like, you don't want to get greedy. You want to have an exit plan. And when that price hits, you sell and you get the hell out, right? Like, you got to have that set there. And it's funny you brought up the Merlin thing because Rachel I was sharing with her last night, right? For everyone listening, I'm an open book. I don't mind sharing. Like, Mary and I were going to connect last night and I hit Mary up and I was like, hey, I'm just feeling like kind of burned out. Like, definitely feeling like the winter vibe as well. Like, I'm not the best at hibernating. So, winters are usually pretty tough for me. I hit you up and I was like, hey, like I'm just going to reschedule. Let's do it tomorrow, which has been awesome because I'm such a better energy today. But I asked Rachel after, I was like, like, I'm really feeling as though like I want to connect with Cannabis tonight. Right. But, I'm typically only connecting on weekends and things like that. And, I'm an open book about this too, right? Like I tell everyone, like the goal with Cannabis or anything in your life that maybe is a coping strategy or was at a certain point is to be really honest with yourself. And so the first 4 years I was doing this, or 3 and change, I was doing strict Monday through Friday, never connect, only on weekends connect, right? And that structure served me really well. But over the last 6 months, really the last year as a whole, I've been feeling another transformation happening, which I've been talking about a lot now, which is like the final stage of this is to loosen the structure and go back to intuition and really be able to be honest with yourself in the moment. Like, is this coming from a calling or is this coming from a craving? Yeah. Is this me just coping or is this me actually connecting? And so last night I was feeling this call, right? This deep call, like Cannabis will help you here, man. Like, we got you. And yet I was telling myself, no, I can't, right? Like, I'm not going to do it, blah, blah, blah. And so I mentioned it to Rachel and she was like, why don't you connect with cannabis? Like, oh my God. And she went through this astrology thing of like how I'm going to get this so wrong. Any astrology person is going to be like, oh my goodness, Ryan. But basically my opposite, for lack of a better term, is Taurus. And Taurus, their whole thing is like herbs and like being in the garden and like things like that's actually how is a certain type of a part of my astrology where like that's a certain way where how I process things or something like that. And so I was like, whoa, when I felt this energy go through me. And I know that to be a good sign. Like when I feel that, like that uptick in energy, I'm like, okay, this is coming from a place that isn't just like a coping mechanism. So I tune in, I connect with the plant and I go hit the sauna. And I go into the sauna and I create a lot of space in there. I just have this conversation with myself. And, you know, when I come out of it, I'm like, okay, I'm feeling better. I go take a cold shower. I'm really in my body then. Right. And then I decide, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go meditate I'm not going to put a timer on. I'm just going to go meditate. So I just come in here and I put an eye mask on and I just start meditating. And I meditated for like over an hour, which like usually like I always have a time limit or something like that. And I just let myself go for it. During that process, I was somatically processing, right? I was feeling things pop up because a big story of mine too is I can't find my feelings or feel my feelings, et cetera. I've already gone through that. But again, if you're moving so fast, you really can't feel them. Those times where I slow down, like last night, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I can feel my feelings, no problem. So I spend an hour, 15 minutes, something like that, hour and 15, going through the somatic processing. And then at a certain point, like I'm just tuning in and I'm waiting for anything else to come. And I'm drifting out, I'm getting third eye visions. And eventually I'm just like, okay, I think I'm good. And I walk out to Rachel and I'm like, I think I did it. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, I think I like did the thing that's the hardest for me. Like I had a plan for my night. I tuned in. I realized like, hey, there's something going on inside of me. And instead of tabling it, I actually was like, okay, I'm going to actually connect with this plant. I'm going to tune into it the same way I do every weekend, but I did it on a weekday and it worked out amazing. And like, it was just like one of those experiences where I was like, okay, this is definitely like starting to become an easier button to hit now, because I'm starting to see like when I do that, I came back to work today, like, okay, like I definitely have more energy, still noticing overall, like, yeah, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like I'm just seeing every day of like, it's kind of funny to me. I'm like, wow, who plans this much stuff into a day? It's just so silly, and again, I'm the only one to look at, so it's really funny we're talking about all this.
Well, there's two things they're two different things too. So the first one, because I just slipped for a second, and usually when it comes in, it's like, oh God, I got to catch that back. So the compartmentalizing and like tabling, it's like you drive your function button with the intellect in a very logical, way. However, it can get outweighed by drive. And we've already kind of gone through that, but basically like it can also be a form of distraction. And then that kind of goes back to, it almost feels like I'm getting deja vu from that session that we had a year ago, but basically like where that can also just distract from like maybe that core thing of not being enough. And it's like, you then get to the top of the hill and there's all these people being like, like applauding you. And you're kind of like, well, this is awesome. And I wasn't necessarily gearing for this. And I know that this doesn't intrinsically fill that hole, but it's beautiful. I love you all. And I'm just going to keep going. So it's like, it's very like hardwired in there. So like, even if it takes a couple nights where you check in with Rachel, and it's like for her support, on, hey, I'm feeling this. And she like echoes, hey, just sit with it or relax, serve it, whatever, which is also a good thing for you to open up and like receive that as well. Yourself to like get that from your partner and then like move and take the space, because that hyper functioning and compartmentalizing it can be a form of distraction. And this dimension is like is a dimension of distraction and or masking. And we kind of already went through that. And then there's another thing, interestingly, that was coming through that basically, so this kind of gets into like the 12 chakra system, but there's this importance for Ryan on like basically integrating the 10th chakra, which is like the earth star. So that goes into like what we were talking about with the elementals and, connecting with the Taurus energy, the opposite, like the forest, because there's an energy that seems to be coming like it's like the 9th chakra area, which is more 8th, 9th chakras. So those are like universal and galactic energies. And there's definitely like light streams that shower you always, which is why at the foundational level, your highest awareness is for the ascension and expansion of humanity. Because on a galactic stream, there is like a connection that you have. I'm not sure if you've ever been told that or know that already, but that also is something that can create super high energy and that feeling of like like expansion, which is also connected to the clairsentience. But yeah, interestingly, like, and with the ninth chakra, it's like a couple feet above your head. So if we were sitting in a room, I'd be like staring at it, but we're sitting here now and I still see it. There's no different person, whatever. But yeah, when you really open up the space in these lower chakras, then you're going to be able to start to really tune into some very, I think this is connected to the like light encrypted streams of consciousness that are numerically driven, which is just like a form of intelligence that you can download instantaneously. And it basically, you just like wake up one day and you're like, whoa, how do I, you know what I mean? And it's so internal, but then it will allow you to have a super grounded knowing of like, I am enough because I'm literally experiencing something so deep and internal because I made the space to do it. I'm grounding this energy into the earth star, which is about a foot or two below your feet in the earth. And I'm doing it enough day to day. You know, I'm doing it at least like 3 times a week where I'm getting in my barefoot. I'm getting my feet, you know, dirty. Although you guys are on the East Coast and I think it's snowing. So
yeah, it's snowing right now. Yeah.
Some type of thing you could figure out with that. But there's the essence of connecting that 10th chakra and the 8th, 9th chakras and sort of like bringing those together. But again, to reiterate, I think the main thing is around here, the throat and the third eye. And then you kind of clear any of the stuff going on there. Then you start to connect with like the root, the sacral, you know, that stuff in general. And then you start to go into like those other meditation spaces where you intentionally are like, okay, I'm going to really carve out the time this week to like exercise that part of my brain that is very active, very there. I mean, I would be seeing this if it wasn't literally in your field. So yeah, does that make sense?
Oh, that makes perfect sense. You know, and it's funny because once again, Rachel's one of my best teachers. She's been meditating like 3 hours a day recently.
Wow.
And she's been having profound results. And I know this stuff. Like, you know, it's so funny. Like I literally teach this stuff. I tell other people to do it. I meditate every day, at least for 30 minutes. But, you know, I've been finding like, I've just been feeling like I time it in the morning. And when that 30 minutes goes off, I just have this intuitive sense of like, you're barely even started. And yet I'm like, oh, well, my day is getting started. I got to go. Right. So like, you know, there's been this awareness of like, you really need an hour at least once a day, if not twice, like morning and night. My latest thing has been the sauna at night, right? Which is very similar. Like I get in there, I'm alone. I do my cold shower after, you know, like that's kind of like my de-stressing from the day or whatever. And that's been a big step forward, right? In terms of like, okay, when my day is done, like go be quiet with myself for a little while and just like sit with myself. But even that can be distracting, right? Because you still got the sound of the sauna. You're like, you know, sweating absolute balls in there, right? So like, you know, it can be kind of that challenge, you know? And so like when it comes to meditating, that was why like last night I was like, wow, that was so powerful. And I'm like, I mean, I was seeing some crazy shit. And this is like what also Breathe with Cannabis does for me too. Every one of those workshops, I'm completely sober during because I just prefer to guide in the sober state when it's like virtual like that. And so I do every one of them sober. And like, I've never had third eye activations like I have at the end of that workshop where like, I mean, I go for it in the breath work. Like I go all mouth breathing. I just send it, typical Aries, you know, but at the end of it, you know, it's like, oh, it's that same pattern again. But at the end of it, like, I think the reason I'm doing it is because I'm like, I'm going to obliterate whatever that voice is that tells me I can't just be. And so by the end, it's obliterated. And I just lay there. And it's so funny. I've talked to Chris and Aaron about this where, you know, Chris will be bringing like, there's like probably like 15 minutes at the end of Breathe with Cannabis. For anyone who's been there, you'll know what I'm talking about, where the breath work is ended and then we're doing sound healing, right? Chris is playing some bowls and things like that. during that time is actually like what I realized is that when I first got into breath work, I thought that like the retention holds and like things like that were like the thing, right? Like that's where I'm going to, like, as someone who loves stimulation, that's what I'm looking forward to. What I've realized in the last couple of months is that actually it's at the end of the breath work where you're just laying there and all of a sudden you're just gone. Like you're just floating in the ether and you're seeing all these visions. And it's funny because I'll be deep in that space and I'll like all of a sudden get an awareness of like, what is that? You know, like just this like little tiny, like, you know, little touch. I'm like, what is that? And then I hear it again and I'm like, what is that? And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I'm a human. Oh my God, I'm in a workshop. Oh my God, I got to get up. And like Chris is like, literally everyone's about to come back on screen. I'm like, oh my God, you know? And so, like, that's going to be completely sober. And so I've been seeing like these opportunities to dive in deeper. And this is really validating because now I'm like, all right, cool. Like I can make that part of me that is really good at like, you know, structure and whatever, and really wants to be highly optimized all the time. Like, all right, this is your next mission. Like put this in your calendar. This is what you prioritize now. And I know that I'll be able to crush that, you know? So that's really cool information in there.
Well, what's so interesting too is I did a vipassana like a month or two ago. And so that's the 10-day silent meditation. For those who don't know, vipassana is you enter into noble silence for 10 days. It's for anybody and everybody. You don't have to have experience with meditation. There were several people that I connected with thereafter who had never meditated once in their life and were just basically like first stepping their toes into something like that, which I thought was incredible. And so with noble silence, you know, and it's a Buddhist branch of meditation, and it's basically a very specific type of meditation where it's like a body scan, but you basically can't veer away from the focus of scanning your being. And when you do, you kind of basically start over, which is natural. And it's not that you can't, it's just that the mind does. And then the more that you practice it, the better you get. But yeah, it's like 10 days of, you know, no eye contact, no speaking. You're in your own room. You can't bring writing material. You can't bring books. There's 2 meals a day. And then you can have fruit and tea as a new student. And then the old students who return, you don't have tea or fruit. So you only have breakfast and lunch. And it's all vegetarian food. And then it's 11 hours of sitting in meditation a day, broken in increments. I bring this up because you were mentioning Rachel incorporating a 2-hour a day meditation. They recommend to do 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour at night to integrate and continue to do the practice. I will say I facilitate breath work, so I do more of an active meditation. So I've been, you know, getting messages for a long time to do a much stronger and longer meditation because I do meditate, but not for like hours in a day. And the biggest things that I saw, to sum it up out of all the things, was how much programming and distraction we live with, and oversensory, overstimulation, consumption. And that includes with the thinking, because there were times where, you know, it's like day 4 and you by day 4, there's already been almost 50 hours of meditation, only 8 meals. You're not talking to anyone. You're not looking at anyone, which that actually was easier for me, to be honest. But you start to really see how repetitive, like, some of our thoughts are. The loops. I mean, we're all aware in this, you know, in this space of thought loops, ego traps, whatever you want to call it. But some of the things that we're looping, not even necessarily negative or positive, even just like sort of repetitive statements or intuitions. It was very interesting. And you kind of have to break through that, because if you're in a state of meditation enough and you are like noticing a loop for the 6th hour of the day, you have to like dig into a part of yourself that's like trains that other part of you to like release it. And it's not an intellectual thing. It's actually like, it's sitting with it. So like, it's like literally the biggest takeaway is sitting with yourself longer than you think you're supposed to sit.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like, we'll do 10 minutes of meditation, 20 minutes. But in our day-to-day, there's so much to do. There's so much distraction, whatever. This was like, no, if you're in a rough spot or if something's going on, Mary, like commit to like a mini vipassana, which they do have. You can actually go if you do your first vipassana, you can go as an old student and do like a 3-day vipassana while they're doing a 10-day. And I couldn't speak higher of meditation, trying to incorporate it.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, like literally, like when you know full well that you've done enough, double it. That's the kind of thing, especially with meditation, because, like you're saying, it's like, okay, so even like TM, which I started with way back in the day, they recommend 20 minutes twice a day. And when I think into it, I'm like, okay, so you mean to tell me that I have 12 plus hours that I'm going, getting distracted, all the things. And then I got 40 minutes a day to wrap it all up, And so like, I'm not saying that you should spend half your day doing it necessarily, but like having a solid hour in the morning and a solid hour at night, that seems like a much more feasible way in which to at least bring balance to this, stimulation and relaxation cycle that we go through. And so I'm really glad you brought that up because, that's something that's definitely been calling me for quite a while. And my goal is this year to like build my life in a way where I can actually say, hey, I'm taking off for a week. I'll see you guys later, or 10 days actually, And so I'm really fortunate that you brought that up because I think for a lot of people listening too, like if you guys are like me, you go through a lot of this stuff, and I think that like sometimes just like going to the opposite polarity, like, yeah, just go to 10 days of silence can be a great way to come back to the calibration in the middle where it's like, okay, now how do I expect or want to, integrate this back into my life, And so I'm really glad they brought that up. And Mary, this has been amazing. Like, I'm so excited to have you back on again. I'd keep dabbing you for hours and hours and hours. And I'm so excited to come out and see you in person again. Hopefully before too long, I'll be back on the West Coast. So I'm super excited. I'd love if the people know where they can find you, where they can find your services. Guys, if I haven't stated it clearly enough, Mary's a genius of what she does. She's extremely gifted and she's supported me in so many aspects of my life like she did here today. I mean, you guys heard a really raw and authentic version of both of us chatting about a lot of the things she was seeing in me. And you could see how many breadcrumb trails those things started that she brought up. And so super grateful for you, Mary. I love you so much. And let the people know where they can find you, where they can connect with you, and where they can experience your magic.
Love you so much, Ryan. And I just have to say, like, I'm so happy that we connected. I was actually thinking about this the other day, who connected us.
Shaker, yes.
Shaker.
The man, the myth.
And this is a guy who he works as a doctor in like the penitentiary system for everybody and he's very like underground, like scientist behind the curtain type of vibe. And I was just reflecting on him and how this world works and just the quantum web of connection. It's so trippy because as soon as I met Ryan, like my whole world opened up because he's literally connected to everybody. But yeah, you can find me at Mary Buckingham 2 underscores on Instagram. I just changed my Instagram handle. Experiencewithmary.com is my website. And then I'm actually in the process of building out a course that I'm super excited about. And it's basically going to be like a container where you'll be able to work with me intimately. I'm probably going to close down my public schedule and just have it dedicated to people in the container. So if you guys want to get in a session before then, you can find me on experiencewithmary.com. And if you're in California, if you're in Orange County, or if you're in LA or San Diego, I teach breathwork groups and modality called Kundalini activation process, which we didn't even get to talk about. But yeah, so I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. And
Mary, you are the best. Seriously. Like, it's so amazing. I'm so grateful you're putting that course together too, because the world deserves it. Like you got so much magic that you've been given to the world, and to be able to bring it to even more and more people. I mean, guys, like how much could you each benefit from having this type of awareness that Mary can bring into your life? Again, like I can't measure how much the ripple effect of that has been, but it has been huge. And this is the whole idea, right? Of people coming together, sharing their magic and lighting up the world together. And we'll definitely give Shaker a shout out because that guy has connected me to so many amazing people, you being one of them. I think, were you the one that introduced me to Brandon Thomas, or was it Shaker? One of you guys introduced me to him as well, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure offhand, but
might have been Shaker because you introduced
So this like
me to
web,
Brandon.
right? Like it was so funny. I was talking to someone the other day that Shaker connected us with, and they were like, dude, we really got to like do something special for Shaker. Like that guy has created so many friendships,
We do.
And so it's so cool.
I remember when I talked to him, I actually reached out to him a month ago, and I was just like, I just want to thank you so much for like connecting me. He's so like, doesn't even think about it. His thing is, he's like, my gift is literally, he has like a genius with connecting people. Like he just knows, he can see some network of connection with people because he nails it. Like he gets it really right.
You know, like, I met Shaker through Paul Check, and he was like, I'll connect you to some really cool people. And literally he's connected me to like the coolest people I know, and like 60 plus people now. He just reached out the other day and connected me with another amazing person, you know? So it's like, that dude he's incredible,
oh my
you know?
God. So how did we know Paul?
Him and Paul, I think he just came to a workshop. I think it was the shamanic sound healing workshop I went to. And it was right after I'd gone on Check's podcast. So like people had just heard the podcast, and he was like, dude, like, I love what you do. Oh my God, it's so awesome. And we immediately started hitting it off. And he was like, hey man, like, could I connect you to some cool people? Like, I think I could get you some cool podcast guests. I was like, yeah, hell yeah. Because I play that role too. So it was like so funny to experience that for the first time. Someone else.
You do. Yes.
It was like so crazy. And like, that's where I'm like, Shaker, there's like definitely a whole role of you being like a joint venture person or something like that, where you can help people get connections, like a recruiter of sorts, you know? And like, the dude is amazing 100%. At it. So guys, I hope you all enjoyed this episode so much. I know you did. This was an amazing deep dive. Every time I get to dive with Mary, I am just so impressed at her ability to not only access intuition, but also articulate it in a way that really just like strikes a chord that allows me to feel that rush right from my center. And so for any of you looking to experience that magic for yourself, like Mary said, you can find her on Instagram, you can find her on her website. All the links will be in the show notes. And guys, if you enjoyed the episode, we would so appreciate a 5-star review. Helps get the podcast out to more and more amazing people just like you. And so guys, till next time, I hope wherever you are in the world, you are having the best day ever. And I love you to infinity and beyond. Peace.